Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn. And on the other side of the coast is Stuart Tiffin, my intrepid co-host. How are you today?
Hey, hi. Doing well. How's it going over there?
Well, while you are in the scorching heat and fire country, over here in Brooklyn and New York, we've had a deluge of crazy rain, so much so that some of the subways were flooded yesterday.
Yeah, I saw some of that footage. And I also saw some condoms floating in the water photos, which are obligatory.
It's New York. And, I will say, because there's a lot of people just going, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. And you know what? Anytime you have these kind of like crazy flash storms here in New York, that tends to happen in something because like a drain won't work or whatever, and it's just not equipped to deal with that kind of level of water. But it does seem to be somewhat unfair that these crazy storms are happening here, and then your side of the world needs more water. So I don't know what the answer is, but man, it was a little bananas. We'll admit that. It was definitely, we only caught, so that was like in the morning. And then last night, we caught the edge of a storm and just the edge of it. And it was insane. Like the whole street was kind of full, and all the drains were full. So, but we, didn't have quite the same issue that other parts of, I guess, Manhattan did. So, but anyway, so that's what's going on here.
Yeah. And it is super gross.
It is gross. And it's one of those things where, I saw some of the footage of people, and I don't know, I mean, some of the footage of people like in the subways, like people were still trying to like get down, and definitely no trains are going to be running when it's like that. But I'm kind of, if I saw that level of water happening in a subway, there's no way I would be going down into it. You know what I mean? Because it's gross.
You don't know what's in that water.
Well, also there's like, I don't know. I saw a couple of because like the rats tend to try to escape and things like that. There's also that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then my biggest, aside from the grossness of it, I feel like if it's that level of water, like kind of taking over, you could easily get swept onto the tracks, and those are electrified. So that's, probably not a good idea to be
if
roaming
they're
around.
Underwater, they must shut the power off, I assume.
One would hope, but this happened very, very quickly. So I would imagine there's got to be some fail-safe. But of course, my mind is just like, the idea of being swept down into a tunnel by some dirty river of subway water is
rat-filled condom water.
Rat-filled. It is like a horror film. So there you go in real life. But in any case, that's what's going on here. But all seems to be normal now. And so there you go. And
like you said, we're having a heat wave just this weekend, hopefully. And it's going to get to 103 is the current expectation for today. I think in Cloverdale, just like 15 miles away from me, it's going to be 115, I think. So
wow. I mean, I saw that Death Valley, they thought it was going to be a new record, and it's kind of insane. So it's definitely concerning. And, I don't know how long people can be in denial about it, but we're clearly in a bad way in terms of the climate changing and the weather changing. So I guess we'll, have to hope that people will figure it out or something. I don't even know what the answer is.
We have to like turn back the doomsday clock. I think that's one of the hardest things to do. And so I don't have huge hope. Just teaching my son zombie survival. I'm making him watch Black Summer to figure out how things are.
You are not letting him watch it, are you?
No, that would be really, really damaging to a child.
I would imagine it is a pretty. We'll get to that anyway. So, as you may have surmised, we are talking about season 2 of Black Summer, the first couple of episodes. And I will admit, it was very tempting to keep going, but I didn't because of my tendency, as everybody knows, that I forget what is what in terms of episodes, and I get it all mixed up. So in any case, I limited myself to the first 2, though it was very difficult to do that because it is a great show. So teaser on how I feel about it. But before we get to that, we have a few little news tidbits. One, I think, is we've talked about this before about the same research. But they did, The Verge did a pretty big article just recently. Did this come out last week, Stuart?
This was Wired, last week.
Wired, not The Verge. And basically it is research And this has been the basis of, I mean, it was the basis of a few different like it's been the basis of a few storylines and horror movies and things like that. I think it definitely taps into sort of our some of our fears and just ideas about the soul and humanity and all of that stuff.
Mike,
The sort of premise of this article is this woman is right. She wrote a book about it, Brandy Shillis, called Mr. Humble and Dr. Butcher. And this is basically the research, like she came across all this sort of a vintagey group of notebooks and research about this scientist who basically, he was a neurosurgeon in the 60s and 70s, and basically did all this and you know, the premise of his research has actually gone into some very good places. So some of the things that the methods that we use in the research that led to like heart attack patients, like brain cooling procedures and things to preserve like basically function in humans if somebody's had a heart attack, were based upon his research. But some of the other research that he did was so, like, I want to say distasteful. Is that like, or people found it to be very like it's and it's hard to read about because it is, I mean, it's squeamish. He did not, he very much viewed animals just as test subjects. He did most of his research on monkeys and mice and things like that. But the monkeys is what really set people off. And sorry, his name was Robert White. So let's put that in there.
I feel like the lead here is that he was taking the brains out of monkeys and putting them into other monkeys' bodies.
Right. And so head transplants on monkeys. But his ultimate goal with this, or his idea with this, is that you could do this with humans eventually. Yeah. He also did this two-headed dog, like he, and you know, even the way that she describes, Brandy Shillis describes like the notebooks and things like that, it really does. And if you see, like they have a few photos of it, like the notebooks are like blood flecked, like it really looks like a prop out of a movie. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that there is a distaste for his research when it ultimately, I mean, he apparently almost won the Nobel Prize, but he had some very specific ideas about race and some other stuff that was just not necessarily like something that people could embrace. Just throwing, it is an interesting article, so definitely take the time to read it when you get a chance. I might actually read this book. It's kind of I think it would probably be interesting, even although I don't know if I could stomach the stuff about the dogs, honestly. So anyway.
So also in the news, putting aside head transplants for the moment, is a pretty surprising new announcement of a project called Night of the Living Dead 2. And when you hear that, you think, okay, yeah, there've been like 100 remakes of Night of the Living Dead. Not actually 100, but it seems that way. But then when you figure out that the cast is none other than the three actors who were the survivors at the end of Day of the Dead, the doctor and the two helicopter pilot and engineer who ended up on that like deserted island at the end of the movie. It almost feels like it's a sequel to Day of the Dead, and it does, at least, I mean, by having that cast run through consistently, you're like, wow, what could this be? So very interesting just from that perspective, but of course there's a lot of other pieces of this that would need to come together.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they filmed this very much sort of in secrecy, maybe because of backlash about doing yet another Romero remake. I don't know. It's so the person who wrote and directed this is Marcus Slabine. And he did Dark Offerings, and there isn't a release date yet, so as far as I know. Did you see anything about that? I don't think that I saw that. I feel like this was mainly a teaser for people to know that this was happening. But you know, I think that I don't know how you like. I feel like there's a lot of things that are trading on Romero's name that aren't necessarily like. I don't know that it's necessary to do this. So I am. It's interesting that they were able to get these cast members back, and obviously we're going to watch it. But I just think it's interesting that this is the way that they're doing that. That they did this in secrecy, without it's kind of weird to me that they're doing this at all. But
Well,
anyway,
they have a website, livingdead2.com, and on there is a countdown that's counting down 111 days as of right now.
all right.
So I'm not sure when 111 days is from now. It's about 3.5 months, I guess. So we're looking at maybe Halloween. I don't know.
All
But
right.
that's
Well,
yeah, we'll see this. Either that's going to be more information, or that's when the movie drops. And if it's Halloween or that time frame is probably when the movie drops, and that will be of interest.
all right. Well, we'll take a look at it. And the article I was thinking about in The Verge was actually about Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. And this is the, yet another part of that franchise, and deals with Leon and the White House. And,
Claire
the
Redfield.
review, the review is somewhat like, it looks very much like a video game, which we noted when we saw like the teaser, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I don't like I'm not going to go too far into the review just because it's kind of like your standard Resident Evil review. I don't know why people are surprised that it looks a bit more gamer like, and that it's sort of like like the usual plot line. It seems odd to me, but anyway. So there's that, and eventually we will get around to, I guess, revisiting, although I was admittedly kind of done with the Resident Evil franchise, but
Yeah,
maybe we'll.
I'll take a look at a couple of episodes and see if it holds my interest. Basically, they're going to the White House, so they're really up in the ante. And then other news, which was sad, that I think came out last week, it might have come out a week or two ago, was that Lovecraft Country is not coming back for a second season on HBO. We never finished recapping the entire season over here on Reanimated, just because I think we were doing that during a lull, and then a whole bunch of content dropped. And then we didn't come back to it, which we probably should have, instead of going to some really terrible movies around the beginning of 2021.
I know, but
yeah, but the big news that somehow dropped after the news about the cancellation was that they're like, well, you know what, season 2 is going to be zombies. And as we know, we had tentacle monsters and witches and wizards and warlocks and stuff like that in the first season, and those giant eye beasts. It was I thought it was a fantastic show. It was making a lot of really important like observations and storytelling that really had a lot of resonance post George Floyd, and with everything going on last summer. So I feel like there's definitely there could still be a demand for this, and I hope that somebody other than HBO picks it up to move it forward.
well, and I think you and I commented when we were talking about this earlier that we saw like more about sort of some of the teaser about season 2 almost after they had announced the news that it was canceled. So it does seem like they might be shopping it out. And it does seem like they had a lot of plans in place for season 2, that they had mapped out a very specific storyline for it. And it was pretty detailed. It didn't seem like it was just sort of like a shallow, like, oh, we're going to do a season 2 and maybe we'll come up with some stuff later. So I do, I'm wondering if it may happen that some other network picks it up. So that's possible. So I do hope so, because I really do. While we didn't finish sort of recapping the series, I do think that this was really well done. And I thought that the cast was excellent. And it is a storyline that you don't often see, and the commentary I thought was significant. So yeah. I would definitely, and I would certainly watch a second season of this. But so we'll see. I'm wondering if it comes up, it comes up with something else. And Misha Green, who is the, obviously the person behind the scenes here, and she's going to be just fine. She actually basically has a deal with Apple now to create like a few different projects with them. So I think that she's going to be fine on that, but I'm wondering, maybe, I don't know, could Apple pick it up? I would love to see that. So we'll stay tuned to that news, and maybe we'll have a good update later. But she, she's a very busy person these days. So I know she was attached to Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider film, I think,
Oh,
and a few other projects, and in addition to whatever she's going to do with Apple. So I guess so we'll see what's going on. I definitely like the things that she writes and creates. So I'm curious to see all the projects she's got in the pipeline now. So
yeah, for sure.
Without further ado, I think we should start chatting about Black Summer 2. And we did mention that Simon Pegg had watched it and gave a very positive review. And I was not let down by his enthusiastic support of this season so far. And again, I've only watched the first couple of episodes. And you've watched beyond that, right, Stuart?
No, actually, I had stopped because I was trying to. I was watching the end of the Fear the Walking Dead. I think I was watching. I don't remember why, but when I saw it drop, I was like, part of me also wants to like give them good feedback through Netflix by immediately watching it the day that it comes out. But
okay, I get that.
I'm gonna keep teasing it out. I mean, it's still pretty highly listed on Netflix's homepage, so I feel like it's still getting a fair amount of views. But I definitely want to make sure that they get that good feedback so that they make more of it.
Oh yeah. But the first couple episodes, yeah. The Cold and Prelude are what they are titled. And I, my overall review is that it's excellent. It is, in turn and by comparison, it was, I know this sounds kind of like, okay, because we are talking about zombie films, but while Fear the Walking Dead has felt like such a slog this past season, this was like really exciting, really well done, fast moving.
They come at storytelling in such different, like opposite ways.
Right. And this is storytelling. There is very little dialogue in this entire thing, much like, we commented on the first season. That was kind of the same.
Yeah, they have stayed the course as far as their approach goes.
But it's really showing you what's happening. And it's also very interesting because it's non-linear storytelling. So, the vignettes you're seeing with the different people, at least in these first two episodes, and I don't know if this will, I'm guessing it may continue throughout the season, though I can't comment on that yet. But you're basically seeing like different parts of the stories, sometimes jumping back and forth depending on which characters you're viewing. And
this is different this season from last season, because last season definitely. It did do the vignettes based on the characters, and I think that those were the title cards. It was the name of the person? I think for the most part. And this time there was only one vignette, I think, that was called Anna and Rose. The other ones all had like a thing that was happening was the title.
No, there was like Luca and Sophie. That was,
and there was Officer Ray Nasri. Yeah, okay. So there were a couple of other ones. But for the most part, I feel like the majority of them were now like 3-point turn, ditched, The Cold, which was the first one. And so they've kind of switched up their method a little bit, but so much of it is still, like we're saying, based on just what is happening. They're still leaning really heavily on these tracking shots that are just, they're gripping. Like the first 7 minutes of this show in The Cold is basically, I don't know if it's 7 minutes of one shot tracking, because there are a few transition points where they could have easily like picked up a new shot, like they get in really close to the yellow raincoat. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But it's basically 7 minutes of one continuous point of view. And those are just, oh my gosh, I've always been such a sucker for those. And
I'm a sucker too for it. And it's really well done. And then, sadly though, Lance bites it pretty quickly.
How awesome that I was so obsessed with Kelsey Flower and Lance and is he in the season? And there he was. And I was like, yes, he's in it. So he survived the run at the stadium. Yep. Like he made it.
And we didn't think he was going to, but he did at least into the first
he picked himself up a bright yellow raincoat.
Yep.
And it was obviously like siphoning gas to put it in a Mercedes.
Yep. And then his better nature kicks in to his detriment. But he still has a pretty good featured spot in this, even after he zombifies. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. He definitely had he uses those running skills that Kelsey Flowers showed off in season 1. He uses them again in this episode.
I know, but it's like a lot of bursting through doors, which I thought was
Oh
phenomenal.
God.
And it was very fast moving, but the camera work is done really well. And, generally this sort of like POV, like with the, the shaky cam and whatever like sometimes it's not done well. I feel like it was done very, very well here. And not, it does have moments where it feels, or a lot of moments, I guess, where it feels like a video game, to some extent, where you're following, like, say, a character or whatever. But I felt like it was done overall very well, and they kind of kept this consistent
Yeah.
throughout these episodes, and really just incredibly tight. Just the editing is great, and then there's some really, like, especially with the character of Lance, when they're just sort of like following what's happening to him. There is this really great drone shot where he's like on the top of a car. That, I don't know, what did you think of that, Stuart? I thought it was
Well,
just
but yeah, that's a fantastic shot. It's part of the 7 minutes series. So I guess
right.
the POV does kind of go up into that drone, but then the practical effect of crashing that car and
Yeah,
Lance flying off the front of it or the top of it. How did they do that without killing that stuntman?
I don't know. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, whatever this is just, it just looks so good. So I can't say enough good things about this. And if you haven't watched it yet, I definitely recommend getting into it, because it
Oh
is
yeah, and
it
if you
is great.
haven't, stop listening to us. Go watch it, and then come along for the ride while we kind of
Yep.
gibber about it for the next 30
Yep.
minutes or so.
Um,
Because yeah, that first sequence, it's called the cold, although it's like summer or maybe fall. No idea what time of year it is. The woman who pretends to be pregnant and gets into his car, I think, is a character who shows up later on. I think she's the woman who then has the orange coat and joins the gang, and then is also featured in the ambush sequence. You know the woman I'm talking about? She has black hair. She has a
yes, and
pistol.
isn't that Sophie?
Is her name Sophie?
I think so.
So I have, this show, unless there's dialogue where somebody says, "Hey, John," it's kind of hard sometimes to figure out who people are, unless also in Ray Nasri's sequence, it's all about him and it's got
Yep.
his title card. So I don't know. I didn't pick up what her name was. Yeah, okay. She's Sophie. She has a through line from participating in carjacking and killing Lance into joining that gang and participating in the ambush scene.
Yep. So we have her. Um, we've got, and we're seeing like different groups of people. And the thing is that this is like a pretty big cast. So you're seeing like these different vignettes, and it does move very quickly. So
Yeah, some of the
I
vignettes are short.
they're short, but trying to sort of, they are definitely, and each vignette does have like an overlap into the prior vignette, basically, or that's
Some
kind of
kind of, yeah,
some,
or they're all
kind of like,
related. By the time you get to the end of the episode, you're like, okay, yeah, this is related. But everything is a little bit out of like chronological order.
yeah,
And to me, I'm not 100% loving that. It's just it's more work for the audience.
yeah.
And I tend to not love those kinds of things as long as they don't drag it out. I think if they manage to do it this way until we're all caught up and then we go forward from some point, I would be happier with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
It is a little disjointed.
it's jarring, yeah, because
It is a
like
little
we're
jarring,
watching stuff backwards right now in
but
some.
I also think it's kind of deliberate, because you're learning things about characters that then inform what you know about them when you almost jump back in time to see what's happening. So
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting to me. And it's honestly, to me, it's a somewhat inventive storytelling mechanism, because you're already developing these ideas about a character, and then you see kind of what led them to that point, but you're looking at them in an earlier time. So I think that's kind of interesting, but you're right, it's not an easy mental switch. So
yeah. In the sequence that comes after the opening one, it's just says 4 months later. There's no real title there. You got the man in the orange, in the yellow construction jacket, like running uphill. This was a scene that was featured in the trailers.
yeah,
Like in the snow, suddenly he's like running away from a zombie. He's having a hard time, but so's the zombie, luckily. Gets to the fence, gets through the fence. Suddenly the zombie is shot. He's like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." Then he gets one through the head too.
yeah,
And then we find out in the next episode, basically, who did that.
yeah,
And I feel like some of the emotional resonance of that, of finding out who did that shooting, is lost a little bit unless you go back and watch it again, in a way,
Yep.
for me.
And
So
maybe,
that's,
but
yeah,
that's like, that might be the intention though.
maybe.
I think they do want you to watch this more than once to basically be, okay, now I'm filled in on all of this. And I think one of the takeaways and one of the, things about this, we do see characters that were obviously in the last episode. Sadly, Lance no longer with us, but eventually we do catch up with Rose and Anna and Sun. And do we see it, like, do we see Spears in this or in the next
No,
one?
Spears doesn't show up until the next episode.
No, I thought he is in this one, but very
Oh, he's
briefly.
in Ditched. Yeah, he just gets up and starts walking towards the mountain.
Right. So we see the main people who are going to make an appearance in this, I guess.
Yeah, a big
But
part of this was the two sequences that go one after another, but they are actually chronologically offset by about, I don't know, 5 minutes or less. The first one was Ambush, which is a
right,
really confusing scene, and then Prisoners comes right after that, and that's
right.
also pretty confusing. It's basically the same action shot from two perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And you're also
Yeah,
trying to figure out the relations of the different characters,
who the hell
and
is? Yeah, well,
and that's the thing
yeah,
with both of these episodes. It's sort of like, like Sun pops up in Ambush, and that's the first time we see her in the series, and it's unclear what her relation is to the people keeping her prisoner. It's unclear, they're trying to sort of, it seems like they're trying to get information out of her, and it seems like she might be with the other prisoner, and then later you find out that's not the case. So
yeah,
there's like so much information that they are packing into
yeah,
this. And
but yeah.
again, but the thing is that I am impressed with it because it ultimately eventually makes sense. um
Well, we
and they're
still don't
not.
know the relationship of the green jacket guy who was tied to the tree and Rose, which I think
No,
he's
but
the
we know.
snowmobile guy she references in the second episode.
Right, but we do know, like at the end of the second episode, that he makes an appearance at the very end of it.
I
So
think he was a real quick flash on the,
right. So we do know that eventually will be hopefully explained.
yeah.
But
And
the
he
part
talks
that
about a house where his wife
right,
is and
but the
being
part
killed.
that is interesting, like as you're going through this, is that especially with Sun, I was assuming that Sun had come from the house, and that
Yeah,
sort of, but that is not what happened. So
right.
that's interesting too. So it's kind of a cool way of telling a story, and keeps you on your toes, because it's like, there's a level of stress about it, which is weird, because and the level of stress has nothing to do necessarily with the zombies, which is funny. So kudos and hats off to the storytellers and to the film, the
Yeah.
creators of this. I think it's really, really well done.
In Ambush, we also get the first plane flies by, and the lull in the battle when the plane flies by. It's very evocative of Children of Men. That scene where they're in a shootout and there's a baby crying, and they all stop shooting and watch the baby leave, and then they all start shooting again.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing here with the plane flying over. They kind of stop and look up at the plane, and you see this over and over again because obviously a plane is a big deal. We keep seeing this plane. It's doing supply drops. There's like some radio
Right.
transmission in the 3 Point Turn vignette. I don't remember which episode that's in. That might be in the second one, but
But
they're talking about like coordinates and
the
stuff.
plane is a significant cameo character in like
Very
three or four
much.
of these, which is
That's
kind of
obviously, that's like everybody's looking for the plane, right? I think that's what Nasri's looking for with his tactical uh bad dudes, and that's what the gang, I don't know what we're supposed to call them. They're clearly not good guys. Nobody is a good guy. I mean, obviously this is a
yep.
zombie apocalypse, but they, like, these guys are even less potentially good guys than like the Saviors or the Alexandrians. Like there's very little silver lining to these groups as far as I can tell.
Right. And then the other part of this that I thought, especially in the cold episode, and then Prelude 2, um, so this was one piece that, so we do see the zombies running around doing their thing. The cold becomes its own character in all of this, or its own sort of challenge, because
Mm-hmm.
that is something that the survivors are dealing with, and it is a very like serious level of cold. And I suspect it probably was indeed very cold wherever they were filming this, because I think it was up in Canada, probably near Calgary, I think is what I
Yeah,
understood.
it's shot in Canada, but if I still get the impression they want us to think maybe it's set in the US because
Oh
they're
no,
talking
they
about
do.
Philly later.
Yeah, no, they do want you to think it's in the US, but I just was curious where they filmed it.
Yeah.
But it's in Canada they filmed. But so the cold becomes another thing to survive in addition to the zombies. And the interesting thing is, in the second episode, like Spears runs it, or like gets kind of like mini avalanche, like he slides down this hill, and there are zombies there that are
Frozen,
kind of
basically.
frozen and incapacitated because they're so frozen. But then we see others that are running in the cold, which maybe it's that rigor hasn't set in, or they haven't been, maybe if they're lying in the snow long enough, they become incapacitated, because we do see others that are running around, and maybe
Yeah.
it's if they're newly churned and don't lie down.
That's what I'm thinking, is maybe they're fresher, but we do need to get some consistency here. Like, remember
Right.
the storm episode of Walking Dead where we had ice zombies who were climbing out from under the snow to attack the
Right.
our friends, and there were frozen ones who were ice cubes. And I don't think you can have both. And I do
Right.
think
So,
that when you don't have warm, you don't have blood or heat in your body, these things will freeze solid, is my thinking.
and then won't move. So I
And then
guess
they
it's
will,
the
yeah,
mobility piece. But that was the part that I was a little, that did take me, it made me think about it, just because there was, especially in Prelude, we have Rose and Anna, and we see how they get to the house haven. Um, there is a zombie just running around, and that zombie seems to have some longevity, apparently, because we've seen him a couple of times.
yeah. He's
But
also treed Freddy when Freddy was out looking for wood.
yep.
There's still
But
a big chunk just by the end of episode 2 where we don't know what has really happened inside this house.
right,
Because by the end of the second episode, we get into the house. By the end of the first episode, it seems like Rose and Anna have killed everybody inside the house except for Freddy. But we
right.
don't know how they got there, except that there was, Anna, or Rose rather, is kind of yelling at Freddy a lot, telling him that everybody lost it. And you get the impression there was some pretty gross stuff going on with her daughter, maybe.
Well, also with her, because she says something to
Do I
Freddie,
still
like, "Do
smell
I
good? Yeah.
still smell nice?" or something like that. So I assume there's something pretty gross that's happened here. But also, but again, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that, it's very fast moving, but there's
Yeah.
all these little mysteries. And I just think as humans, we'd like to kind of figure out the puzzle. And
Sure.
they're doing just an incredible job of like stoking that curiosity, basically, about, because you want to know like where the conflict is between her and Freddie, what happened in the house. We see like it's so fast moving, and they pack so much information into it, but not in a way that seems like they're forcing the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it feels very natural in what they're doing. And you're learning, you get these pieces of information that you're kind of putting together at the end. And I'm assuming there will be more of that in the next few episodes. But
And
as
I
you
have
said,
been enjoying the story. I just, like I said, I don't know if this like chronological or like scattered kind of chronology is my preferred way of
well,
ingesting
it's
a good
not, it's
story.
work. It's work, as you said. And it's not like it's mentally an effort. You can't, I wouldn't say that this, at least these first two episodes, you're not going to just be able to like kick back and just, you have to pay attention. You know what I mean? And I definitely think both worth a rewatch, and I rewatched sections of them to make sure I got certain pieces, and
Yeah.
then as I was rewatching them, I noticed other details in them. So
The end of the first episode is also just it's like not the main story, but it just like closes a loop. It ties off something kind of
yep,
nicely. It's called Lemons is the name of the
yep,
vignette.
yep,
And it's the guy who shot Lance, which was so dumb. Like he shot him, but didn't shoot him through the brain. He just like shot him through the face or something, to the point where he died within a few seconds, but obviously he just reanimated and became their biggest problem. He also
yep,
sprayed his blood all over the windshield and caused him
yes,
to crash the car immediately. It was like all bad. So this
yep,
guy, we don't sympathize with him. But then from his perspective, he then is trying to like talk his way into a store and is like, "Hey, I'm a vet," and the woman inside is not having it. And he's like, "You're all animals,
mm-hmm.
like you're bad people. This is what you've become." But we all, of course, know that he just carjacked a guy and murdered him, and now he's like, karma. So, but then
Okay, I will.
that
I
run
will
of
own
good
up
luck that he
for
has.
a beat when he said he was a vet. I'm like, I was thinking like a veterinarian, because he called them animals. So I was like, wait,
You're all
and then
animals.
I'm
I'm
like,
a
oh
vet.
wait, different vet, the other kind of vet. It was just like, I
Uh,
don't know. It was more funny about what I was thinking than.
It is though definitely like a story of karma. What happens to this guy,
Mhm.
right? He's a terrible person. He accuses other people of being terrible, who are just like, no, I don't trust you because, I feel like that's a lot of what this season is probably going to be telling us is that you can't trust people. People are bad, and like because we see Rose is clearly not trusting people. She's shooting that guy without, I mean, we find out it's her. She's shooting that guy without even bothering to find out what's going on with him. She just sees a zombie, she kills the zombie. She sees the guy who the zombie was chasing, she kills him too because she's not
Yep.
taking any chances. This
Yeah, and
and
I
this
mean
guy, yeah.
she's also become very, I mean, not, I don't like she has become very like um I don't want to say cavalier. She is very, she has one goal, that's to keep her daughter safe, and basically everybody else is collateral damage if that happens to them. If they can stay and help her, I think she's okay with that. She's fine making some very hard decisions if it slows her down. So we see this with Spears, and
She
then
killed Velez at the end of the last
yep,
season, right? Like, and that
yeah. So
was
we saw this. This is sort of a continuation of that, and I do think that it, even with Spears, like he got injured, he was going to slow them down. She and her daughter just immediately start running, and
yep.
Son is the one that kind of just is like, oh well, I'm
And
not
that's
going to
how
do it.
Sun gets rolled up, but she also
Right.
pushes him down the
She
hill.
saves him basically.
Yeah.
So that's the other part of it.
And
But it's kind of interesting to see that progression, and and how their storylines diverge because of those decisions. So, and
yeah.
as you said, nobody is really good in this universe per se.
There,
And those
the
that
two
do.
guys who are, I mean, at the beginning of episode 2, the two guys, well, not the very beginning, but the second vignette, the two guys looting the store save Anna. They let her in
Mhm.
because they're like, where are your parents? She's like, they're dead. They're like, come on in, have some water. You're safe now. You be our lookout. And she betrays them. And so I think we're going to get a lot of this kind of like, a lot of these moral sort of conundrums, dilemma. Uh, yeah, who knows? I just wanted to go back to the guy, the veteran who he's like he
See,
finds a
I've now
car.
planted that
Thank you.
in you forever.
He finds a car. He finds a loaded Glock or something, and he's like, when life hands you lemons, and then Lance crashes through the window, and like that's the ultimate kind of karmic revenge. Zombie Lance is now, well, we don't know. Maybe the guy gets away, but it definitely doesn't look good for the veterinarian.
Nope.
Then
um
episode 2 has a really cool intro with where we meet Officer Ray Nasri,
mhm.
who is now kind of like a monologuing red coated bad guy who talks about like, this is how it's going to go. Sometimes it goes the other way, but sometimes it's like this. And I'm like, all right, easy does it. Easy does it, mustache.
Mhm.
But he's in there, he's in his garage packing up his tactical stuff, and then having to confront the fact that his family is all zombies. I like the fact that he looks in the mirror before he leaves the house and takes off his wedding ring. It's like a real,
Yep.
yeah, I'm
Well,
not
and
that
this
person
is,
anymore.
and again, this is, the way they're storytelling with so little dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Even just as he's going through the house, you totally understand what happened there. And he's kind
Yeah,
of talking, the few like lines that he has, he's talking to his children. And you can basically see the aftermath of what has happened to him,
yeah.
which I think is pretty cool. Just it's like you don't need him to walk you through it, and that's the thing I appreciate about this show is that they're basically showing you all the details, and you're building the story without the dialogue. It's just truly. It's really well done. And a lot of attention was paid to that storytelling and the editing and the sets. And it's really a fun watch to me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, because we know this guy's going to be probably an antagonist. At least that's how the trailer for the season set him up. And certainly it's how he is portrayed in Ambush or in Prisoners. And then again later on in this episode where he's rolling up. Because in the next scene, that's where he rolls up Sun. And, like this is maybe another little karmic episode where they kick the looters out of the bodega and then they in turn are rolled up by these tactical dudes. And that's a great another tracking series of shots through the restaurant, that when Sun and Spears are like hiding behind walls and then shifting around and the flashlights are coming. I mean, it's so much fun to watch this stuff.
Right. And then there's also some like throwbacks to like the prior season and a couple of vignettes from that season. So there's that whole thing with Sun when she gives the water to the person inside that building, and outside is the car with the where the woman went through the windshield, and we saw them in the prior season, right?
We did.
I think so.
I don't remember them.
They were part of a like another story. So that, so they're paying like such close attention to all these little details. And it's kind of fun. It's like all these little like Easter eggs to uncover and to remind yourself. And I admit I should have watched the other season prior to watching, or rewatched it prior to watching this, and I didn't. And now I'm like, maybe I should go back and watch some of it.
Yeah, Sun definitely though is like holding on to her
humanity,
lawful good alignment there. She's handing out water.
Yeah.
Even though she was part of a an armed assault against some other looters. It's just there's clearly like there's bad stuff going on everywhere. And you see this also in when maybe it's Sophie. Did you say Sophia?
I think it's Sophie. Yep.
When she rolls up to in 3-point turn, there's like a gang has carjacked this truck. And then there's like scavengers who are hanging out around the edge of the gang, and they keep saying, "We're not done yet, back up." And then Sophie gets into the gang by showing that she has a handgun, and then like that's her entry into the gang. So
Yep.
This is clearly like a flashback to before the scene of ambush. We recognize some of these players as the combatants from like the ragtag of the gang. But it's very interesting to see just how they are portraying group dynamics, how people are getting along. Like one of the scavengers just has a brick in his hand. He's just like, this is my zombie survival weapon.
Yeah, and it's also like, they basically, it's weird because they're working sort of as a gang, but definitely there's others not really part of that, and they're like the ones who are either armed or part of this, which is how Sophie gets into this, get like first dibs, and they're basically telling other people to hold back until they get whatever they want to get out of it. And so that's kind of interesting. And it's just kind of like the dynamics that you're seeing with the different groups. The one group that we've seen them now a few times, but this is the Ray Nazarene militia group. We don't have as much information about them other than that they're brutal and they're well organized, although bizarrely easy to take out, or easier to take out than apparently they should be.
Way too easy to sneak up on in broad daylight.
It seems
I did have some issues with the ambush because first of all, that group of like 20 people sneak in quotes up on these 12 armed men who are only apparently looking at Sun or at the other prisoner and not looking around themselves.
I know, it's very strange.
And then in that combat, there's scenes of, it's tracking. So again, you're getting like this weird POV, but there are people, they're very close together. They're like 10, 15 feet away from one another, these combatants shooting at each other, throwing Molotovs. And women or people are running back and forth along the line of combat, like in a way that just doesn't make sense logically. It's great for looking like chaos, but it doesn't make sense. Like why you're like, okay, there's two lines of people, kind of loose lines, shooting at one another. I'm going to run down the middle of that line in between the two sides. So I was like a little bit like, all right, I feel like this could have been better choreographed.
Right.
And maybe if they'd shot it at dusk or at a lower light than what it was, it would have made more sense that they could have crept up. But it was still like super chaotic, and there was great fight choreography, and there was great attention paid to when combatants were killed in the gunfight, they turned into zombies immediately, and then the combatants had to turn and handle those new zombies right away. Like that was something we hadn't really seen too much of in season 1. So there's also a vignette where we get to get some of the background of the construction jacket guy, and he's out at night. He's like looking for stuff in a car. He goes back to this ambulance where he's holed up, and there we meet his friend who's going to be a future zombie. And this is a good person. Like he's like, of course I'm taking care of you. You have to stay well. You have terrible frostbite. I'm going to lie badly to you about how it's getting better. He does buckle him into a gurney, which is like a good move. He's trying to tell him a joke about nuns and soap, which I really wanted to hear the punchline, but we don't get to. And then you kind of like see them start to you see the chase begin that ends with Rose shooting them both in the head like the next day. So this dude's been out running all night. It's just so brutal. This show is brutal. It's spare, it's frigid, and it's brutal. And then by the end of this episode, we've got Spears falling down that hill. There's someone following him. We don't really find out who that is, so that's still to come. And we have Rose and Anna getting into the mansion after taking some pretty poorly advised shots against the zombie. So Rose is still not 100% on that sniper rifle that she's carrying around, but they get inside, and now there were like 5 people inside, and I couldn't tell if there was maybe somebody we haven't seen yet based on some of the bodies we saw inside the mansion in episode 1. But there's so much of that story still to tell that I'm kind of excited to see.
Yeah, and we don't know how many of those people had left, because she basically said that they went out and they screwed up. So we know at least one of them, obviously, but we don't know all of them. And then there's still more to that story that we need to figure out. But
so clearly there's going to be more stuff about planes, more stuff about Officer Ray Nasri and Rose and Anna. Maybe Spears will catch up with him. Sun's still in the mix somewhere, but I think Lance has probably had his last scene on this show, even though
I know
he could show up.
Although I will say they made it really good, and
he went out right.
It was, man, he must have been really tired after filming all this. So but I'm sad because I did really love I just liked his character. I think he was like kind of a weird, fun character.
Like, remember he would like go to the library in the school when they went to the school. He's just like, I'm going to read some books. I'm going to pretend I'm not in a zombie apocalypse. And then he like ends up in a drug den, just like doing heroin or something. He was a total ostrich, but he was still a lovable character somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, and his running was fun. So
he had a lot of running.
So farewell to Lance. But hopefully we'll see Mr. Flowers and some other things. So, but I don't know. I'm really excited to watch the rest of this now.
Yeah.
So, if any of our listeners have watched this and have similar enthusiastic reviews or not, feel free to reach out to us. Send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, reanimatedpcast on the Twitters, or you can just leave a message on the show notes, reanimatedpodcast.com. So anything else to add, Stuart?
No, I think we covered it. I'm looking forward to doing 3 and 4 next time we get together. And
and I may have to rewatch parts of this after I watch 3 and 4. This is the
thing. We're gonna have to. It's definitely a rewatch show, so kind of buckle up for that, I guess.
Yeah, but definitely looking forward to it. And until next time, thanks for listening, and ciao.
Alrighty, bye now.
Bye.